Oh, this cable is directly in my shot. And now it's not. Dan here, Max SPL Videos, and today we're going to talk about DJ speakers. Alright, so if you're a brand new DJ, you're thinking about getting into the mobile DJ business, or if you have a set of speakers that you're not happy with and you're trying to figure out what set to get next, this video might be for you. If you're a more advanced DJ, you've already got a set of speakers worth, over $1,000 each and things like that, this video is not really going to help you too much. But it might be exactly what you need for when somebody asks you, hey, what set of speakers should I get? And it's like, well, hey, just watch this video. Okay, like, subscribe, all that stuff for more videos like this. I plan on doing some on lighting and some things like that. So if you're just getting started, look forward to those. But I digress. First things first, there's nothing wrong with renting. In fact, feel encouraged to do that off the bat. I sell speakers here at my store. I don't want to sell you 2 sets of speakers. If I can get you renting a set, even if it's from somewhere else, you get to try out a set, you get to find out what you like, what you want in a set of speakers, what sounds good to your ear, and then you don't waste your money on an entry-level set of speakers that it turns out don't sound good to you, but it was all you could afford at the time, blah, 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 blah. Rent. Especially if you're just getting started, because if you've got a day job and you're looking to make DJing either an extra source of income or your main job, I would highly recommend not working your butt off at your day job to buy a good set of speakers for an extra source of income that's not bringing in money yet. If you wait a bit, you get a couple gigs, you rent speakers for them, and then buy a set of speakers with that money, you'll likely get a better set of speakers, you'll have a little more experience, so you know what you're after. Win, 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 win. Okay? Don't be afraid to rent. Now, the side benefit of that, like I said, is you get to figure out what type of speakers you like. So you get to try a few different sets, right? You can try some Mackie, QSC, JBL, etc. I'm a big fan of Yorkville, but I'm biased because I'm a Yorkville dealer. Now, if you go and you rent, say, a set of speakers from JBL, and you really like the sound of those JBL speakers, and you're looking and just, I can't afford the high-end JBL, but the entry or the mid-level ones, those ones I can afford, chances are you're going to be happier with those than, say, an entry-level or mid-level EV speaker. And vice versa. If you rent a set of EVs and you like that sound, every brand has sort of their own sound going for them. My QSCs that I really like aren't going to sound like a set of JBLs. So if somebody likes JBL, they're going to like JBL speakers. It's okay to have some brand preferences here. And generally speaking, if you can figure that out, if you figure, oh, I love the sound of brand X, I should probably get brand X that I can afford. The exception to that rule would be, oh, well, if I go with brand Y, I get a much better deal or something like that, right? I mean, you find used items, things like that, right? There's another point there. There's nothing wrong with going on the used market and finding, the last generation of speakers. I wouldn't go too far back. If you're going back, you find yourself a set of 20-year-old speakers and someone's saying, oh, well, they don't make them like they used to. There's a reason for that. PA speakers used to suck. Entry-level speakers, especially higher-end speakers, they tend to last quite a bit longer. I mean, my speakers are about 10 years old, and I love them. I still do, but I hop on, my local classified ads from time to time, and I find speakers that are just ancient, and they're incredibly overvalued. You can get a new set of mid-level speakers that will likely sound better than an ancient set of what was like, oh, these were legendary. Manufacturing techniques have improved. Yes, reliability in some cases may have dropped in certain price points, but yeah, my general recommendation is either go used within, something that is either still available or was available within the last 5 to 10 years, or go new. And I cannot stress this enough. powered speakers are the way to go. Passive speakers are dead for mobile work. They're great for installs and for stage monitors. I quite like them, or for large touring rigs where you want to have the items separated, because if you're hanging speakers, hanging all of that extra weight, that's extra effort, that's extra money, extra points of failure, all that stuff. If you go with powered, you don't have to worry about that. Okay, so I highly recommend going with powered speakers. An exception to that might be some of the slightly older passive subwoofers. Can be a really good value, because a lot of the active subwoofers that are worth buying are very expensive, where older passive subwoofers, like I had an old rig where I had dual 18-inch speakers. I was running about, I believe I was running 500 watts to each of them, and they sounded amazing, and I paid with the amp less than I would have paid for a single 500 watt 18-inch subwoofer. So sometimes going used and passive can be really good. Just be careful, because sometimes those older passive speakers, a lot of times they're overvalued on the used market, and they're not necessarily going to sound the greatest. Another piece of advice: highs are very important. High frequencies, what's coming out of the tweeter, is often going to sound better in the long run than, oh, but this one makes more bass. Because as you crank that speaker up, yeah, it's producing more bass, but the highs get so harsh that everybody wants you to turn it down. There's no point in having those better bass frequencies. Yeah, sometimes you can EQ that out a little bit, but if you pick a speaker based on how the high frequencies sound, you're likely going to be better off. Okay? Other points: wattage doesn't matter. Period. Especially with active speakers. In passive speakers, it was a little bit different, because you had to make sure you were matching up with a proper amp and all that stuff. Active speakers, I see all the time, oh, but this one's a 2,000 watt speaker and this one's a 1,000 watt speaker. Doesn't that make the 2,000 watt speaker better? And then you go and you check the specifications, and oh, that 1,000 watt speaker, it's actually RMS, where this one is advertising its peak wattage, which, again, it just means nothing. Okay, so ignore wattage for the most part. It's semi-useful statistic, but that's that. Just ignore it. It's especially between brands, it basically means nothing. What can mean something is the max SPL, hence my channel's name. The maximum SPL of a speaker is very important. If it is hard to find, or if it's impossible to find, I don't recommend that speaker. I've seen some speaker brands, especially on the low end, where they do not list their maximum sound pressure level. Don't buy them. I can get them, I can sell them. I don't, because I don't trust those speakers, because I don't know how loud they're gonna be. I don't know how to compare them to anything. Now, be careful with treating it as this number is the end all be all, because some brands calculate it differently than others, because there's more than one way to kind of do it. I don't want to get into that whole thing, but generally, if you're, say, comparing brand X to brand X to brand X at different price points or different speaker sizes and things like that, you can trust that max SPL number pretty darn well, because it's going to be calculated roughly the same on all of those speakers. So if one is 5 dB louder than another, you can trust it'll likely be about 5 dB louder than another. If you start comparing from brand to brand, gets a little more wishy-washy, but as long as they're in the same ballpark, I would say within about 4 or 5 dB of each other, they're likely going to sound roughly the same volume when you get them into the real world. Which brings me to another thing. Listen to the speakers first. Just like I was saying how, rent so that you have a chance to use them. Go to a store and listen to the speakers. Yes, I mean, if you're buying used, testing them out is a little more limited than going to a shop, but just buying your speakers online and never hearing them in person, not ideal. You can get away with it a bit if you've rented like I recommended, and you know you like the brand, and you've heard really good reviews. Yeah, jump on it, I guess. But if you can avoid it, if you can go, I'm gonna hear these speakers in person, always recommend it. Now, in terms of some actual recommendations, let's get to the size of the speaker. generally with the size of a speaker, if you're going to go with just 2 tops and you're not planning on getting a subwoofer, and this I think especially goes for lower end speakers, entry level, mid level stuff, it's often a good idea to get 15-inch speakers, because then you don't really need a subwoofer for those smaller events. I personally prefer 12-inch speakers because generally if you're using a subwoofer with them, they're going to produce better mid-range frequencies. It's just physics, right? The bigger speaker cones are better at producing lower frequencies. Who knew? And that's why usually, you often see, like I use a 212 for my subwoofer, but you'll often see 15 and 18-inch subs used by mobile DJs. If you go with 15s, you're kneecapping yourself a little bit, but especially if it's your first set of speakers, don't worry too much about it. That being said, I would go with a better 12-inch if the price difference between a 15 and a 12 means, oh, well, if I get this set of speakers, I can only get 12-inch, go for it. If you're looking and, hey, the 12s and the 15s, they're roughly the same price. Personal preference plays a lot into it, but yeah, ask yourself, am I planning on getting a subwoofer in the near future? Subwoofers, to use this as a nice little segue, they're very nice to have. They take a lot of the pressure off of your higher range speakers, right? Your 2 tops all of a sudden don't have to use a whole ton of energy to create these low frequencies. So they tend to get a little bit of a boost in volume as soon as you throw a subwoofer underneath them, just because you can crank them a bit more without popping them. And again, that's why I like focusing on the high frequencies on my top speakers and making sure those aren't going to sound harsh. Now that I can crank them up a little more, oh, but that harshness comes out even more? Terrible. Get a set of speakers that has some good high frequencies to them. You add a subwoofer, you get to crank everything up. Everybody wins, right? The bass is louder because you got a nice sub. You can turn your speakers louder because the sub has taken some of those frequencies away from, your top speakers. Just have less of a job to do. Awesome. Now, if you're getting into this stuff, you'll see some ads and some reviews for these line array and column array speakers, although line array, technically most column arrays aren't line array, blah, blah, blah. But, the subwoofer with the little stick speaker that has, an array of smaller speakers above it. These can be a good choice if you are doing smaller gigs. I generally recommend starting with a nice set of top speakers, eventually getting a subwoofer, bang, right? Don't cheap out on your tops just because you're getting a subwoofer, but if you do them in that order, you can have a system that grows with you. Oh, I'm doing a 200-person party, I just need the 2 tops. Oh, I'm doing a 300-person school gym event, okay, I got to get that subwoofer in there. The system grows with you and with your career and can be modular based on the gig that you're doing. Now, those array speakers are very nice. They're compact. Depending on the brand, they can sound really good. There are some out there, like, don't just assume, oh, I hear these are good. That means they're all good. I have a friend, he ordered the cheapest one he could find because he thought, oh, a speaker's a speaker, right? He got it. It sounded horrible because the high frequencies on it sounded like a can of bees. Okay, again, listen to the speakers first. My preference right now is still 2 tops and a sub. Your mileage may vary, but I wouldn't start with a set of array speakers. I would look at those as a future investment for, okay, I'm doing a lot of events where I need a smaller, more compact setup just to make my life easier. There you go. But your mileage may vary. If you're doing nothing but weddings, and, every wedding I'm doing has like 100 people at it, a set of array speakers is perfect for them. That's not a bad route to go. And then, I got hired to do a school dance and I need a big rig. Rent it. Include it in your budget and bang, right? You don't need to own everything to do everything. If you have somewhere nearby that can rent stuff to you. It gets a little wishy-washy if you don't have somewhere you can rent stuff from. but generally you can. Like, if you live in a city of any kind, if you're in a small town, then yeah, you gotta buy yourself a set of top speakers, because you know, driving an hour to rent a set of speakers is gonna be a pain in the butt. It's the reason I own all my stuff, is I am the only game in town when it comes to this type of stuff. I can't really rent without going heavily out of my way. And if I have to rent, then yeah, I include it in the budget, right? If I need something bigger than the system I currently have, I go and I rent it. Let me know. What kind of speakers do you like? You know, do you disagree or agree on some of these points? Let's start a discussion down in that comment section, because a lot of beginner DJs, they're gonna get their advice from either people who don't know what they're talking about but think they do, or people who know what they're talking about and get drowned out by the noise, right? I'm not an expert on this stuff. I've just been doing this a long time. I've been running a PA system for an extended period of time, and I've picked up a bunch of useful information from a lot of people along the way. Yeah, let me know. Do you agree? Do you disagree on any of these points? Leave them down in the comments. Let's start a discussion. I want this video to be a great place for someone to go when they're trying to figure out what they should pick up for their first or second set of DJing speakers. And yeah, like, subscribe, all that stuff. And I will see you in the next video.